After months in the hospital, I finally made it home. My body was weak, but my heart was stronger than ever. I unlocked the door and froze. The living room was empty, not a photo, not a chair, not even my old blanket. Everything I owned, gone. My daughter stood at the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Is greater than we thought you weren't coming back," she said, "so we threw everything away." In that moment, something inside me broke, and then it hardened. I sat down, took a deep breath, and sent a single message to my lawyer. "Is greater than, you were right, let's begin the plan." They thought I was weak. They thought I'd disappear quietly. But what came next was justice. Before we continue, please comment where you are watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travels, and don't forget to subscribe for more. The rain had stopped by the time the taxi turned into Maple Street. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching the house that used to feel alive with laughter. My heart beat slow and heavy, each thump echoing in the silence of my chest. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I left this place carried away on a stretcher after the operation everyone said I might not survive. I remember Laura crying beside me and Ethan promising, "We'll take care of everything, Helen. Just focus on getting better." Now, as I stepped out of the taxi, the house looked smaller. The flowers I used to water every morning were dry, brown, and bent to the ground. The curtains were drawn shut. Even the air felt colder, like the house was holding its breath, waiting to see if I would come back. The key slid into the lock easily, but when the door opened, I froze. There was nothing inside. The couch was gone. The paintings were gone. The bookshelf that used to hold all my nursing books, gone. Even the faint smell of lavender, the one that clung to my clothes and curtains, had vanished. My cane trembled in my hand as I moved through the empty living room. "Laura?" I called softly. "Ethan?" No answer. Only the sound of my own footsteps and the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the only thing that hadn't moved. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. My heart dropped. My dresses, my journals, the little box of letters from my late mother, all gone. The wardrobe stood open, empty, like a mouth that had swallowed every piece of my life. The floor creaked behind me. "Mom?" Laura's voice was calm. Too calm. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. She looked surprised, not happy, like someone caught in the middle of something they didn't expect to explain. I forced a smile. "Laura, where's all my stuff?" She hesitated, then shrugged lightly. "We thought you weren't coming back, Mom. The doctors said it was serious. We didn't want the house to look sad anymore." Her tone was cold, like she was talking about old furniture, not memories. I stared at her, my daughter, the same girl I once rocked to sleep, now speaking to me like a stranger. "You threw everything away?" I whispered. "It wasn't just me," she said quickly. "Dad said it was time to move on. We repainted, got new things. It's fresher now." Her words hit me harder than the surgery ever did. I sat down slowly on the bare edge of the bed, the one they hadn't even bothered to replace. My fingers curled into my lap, trembling. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at the blank walls that used to hold my life. Every photo, every piece of me, erased by the 2 people I trusted most. After a long silence, Laura left the room. The door closed quietly behind her, leaving me alone in that hollow space. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I typed carefully, letter by letter. "Is greater than you were right. Let's begin the plan." Then I placed the phone beside me and looked around one last time. The house was empty, but for the first time in months, my mind wasn't. Before the surgery, I used to believe my family was close. We had Sunday dinners, movie nights, birthdays that ended in laughter. Even when things weren't perfect, we always found our way back to each other. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed something had changed was the night I told them about my condition. We were sitting at the dining table, me, Ethan, and Laura. The air was heavy, and my hands couldn't stop trembling. "The doctors found something," I said quietly. "It's serious. I'll need an operation soon." Laura didn't say anything at first. She looked down at her plate, cutting her food, even though she wasn't eating it. Ethan just sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like I'd told him an inconvenience, not an illness. "Finally," Laura said. "You'll be fine, Mom. They can fix everything these days." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were somewhere else, already thinking ahead. I tried to believe her words, but the silence that followed felt strange, wrong. It wasn't the silence of fear or love. A week later, I overheard them whispering in the living room. Laura said, "What if she doesn't make it, Dad? What happens to the house? The savings?" Ethan answered, "It'll go to us. It's all in both our names anyway. We just need to be ready." I stood behind the hallway wall, holding my breath. I wanted to tell myself I heard it wrong, that they were just worried about how to take care of me. But deep down, I knew the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind tapped against the window, and every sound felt heavier than usual. I kept asking myself, when did love start to sound like waiting? When the day of the surgery came, Laura helped pack my things. She moved quickly, like she was cleaning up instead of preparing for me to return. Ethan kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry, we'll handle everything." Something about his tone made me feel small, almost replaceable. At the hospital, I met Mr. Porter, my lawyer and old friend. He had been a patient of mine years ago, back when I still worked as a nurse. He said, "Helen, before you go in, I want you to sign these papers. They'll protect your interests if anything happens." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean, protect?" He smiled faintly. "Just trust me. You'll understand later." I signed, even though I didn't know exactly what he meant. Maybe because I was too tired to question anything. Maybe because something deep inside me already knew I'd need that protection. When I woke up after surgery, everything hurt: my body, my throat, even my spirit. But the first thing I asked the nurse wasn't about my health. It was, "Did anyone come to visit?" She shook her head. "Not today. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow turned into a week. A week turned into 3. Laura sent a few short messages. "Hope you're resting. We're busy fixing up the house." Ethan sent none. Each time I looked at my phone, it felt colder. The hospital room became my whole world, quiet, clean, and lonely. One morning, the doctor told me I was healing better than expected. I smiled, not because of the news, but because I realized something very clearly. They had already moved on without me. That was when I decided that if I did come back, I wouldn't come back the same. The days after I returned home moved slowly, like pages turning in a book I no longer recognized. I kept quiet. I spoke only when necessary. Laura believed I was still too weak to notice anything, and Ethan treated me like a guest in my own house. That silence became my greatest disguise. Each morning, I sat by the window with my tea, pretending to admire the garden. From that spot, I could see everything: the cars they drove, the people they met, the deliveries that arrived when they thought I was asleep. My body was weak, yes, but my eyes missed nothing. One afternoon, Laura came into my room holding a pile of folded clothes that weren't mine. "We bought new things," she said cheerfully. "Your old ones were too outdated." She smiled, as if doing me a favor. I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside, every word cut deeper. Those old things held my history: my wedding dress, my mother's shawl, the blue sweater Laura wore to school when she was 8. All gone. I noticed the small changes too. My family photo on the hallway wall had disappeared. My wedding ring, which I had left on the bedside table before the surgery, was missing. When I asked Ethan about it, he said it must have been misplaced during cleaning. Cleaning. That word began to sound like their excuse for everything. One evening, while Laura and Ethan were out, I walked through the house with my cane, opening drawers, checking corners. touching the walls I once painted myself. Behind one of the drawers in Ethan's desk, I found papers, bank statements, property transfers, and insurance details. Every document had one thing in common. My name was missing. I took photos of everything using my phone, quietly, carefully. My hands shook as I did it, but I kept going. I remembered Mr. Porter's calm voice before the operation. These papers will protect you. Now I understood what he meant. Over the next few days, I began to act differently. At breakfast, I smiled more. I thanked Laura for her coffee, complimented Ethan's shirts, and asked small questions about their new plans. They relaxed, believing I had accepted everything. That was what I wanted. When they left the house, I would call Mr. Porter in a soft whisper. He always answered on the first ring. "I've found the documents," I said once. "Good," he replied. "Don't confront them yet. Let them feel safe. We'll do this quietly." So I waited. I cleaned my empty room, piece by piece, filling the silence with small acts of peace, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I needed them to think I had. I started walking in the evenings, getting stronger every day. The neighbors waved, surprised to see me alive. I waved back, smiling faintly, never explaining anything. At night, I sat by the window again, phone in hand, scrolling through the pictures I'd taken of the papers. My heart no longer hurt the same way it once did. Pain had turned into purpose. Laura often talked loudly on the phone about travel plans, about buying a new car, about a fresh start. Ethan smiled proudly beside her, sipping wine like a man who had won something. They never realized I was sitting just down the hallway, listening, remembering, preparing. I had once believed silence was a sign of weakness. But now, I knew better. Silence was strength, and mine was about to become the loudest thing in this house. The morning light crept through the curtains, soft and golden, brushing across my hands as I read through another letter from Mr. Porter. He had been working quietly for weeks, tracing every financial step Ethan and Laura had taken while I was in the hospital. Each envelope he sent carried the weight of truth. Truth they thought I would never see again. By the third letter, everything was clear. 2 weeks after my surgery, Ethan had transferred all our joint savings into an account under Laura's name. The deed to the house had been changed too, removed from my ownership completely. Even the insurance payout meant for my medical recovery had been used to remodel the house. The new furniture and fresh start suddenly made perfect sense. I read those lines over and over until my eyes blurred with tears, not because of what they took, but because of how little hesitation it must have taken to do it. There had been no pause, no doubt. They had planned for my absence, as if it were a vacation they'd been waiting for. That afternoon, I met Mr. Porter in his office. It smelled of paper and coffee, just like I remembered. He looked at me kindly, but there was a firmness in his voice. "You were right to call when you did, Helen. We have enough evidence to reverse everything, but it has to be handled carefully." I nodded, feeling the quiet pulse of determination inside me. "I don't want to fight," I said. "I just want what's mine." He smiled faintly. "And you'll have it. Every piece of it." We went over the documents together. His pen moved across the papers like a surgeon's tool. Clean, precise, deliberate. He explained what each form meant, what each signature would undo. The plan wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Back home, Laura and Ethan sat at the dining table, laughing over something on their phones. They looked up briefly when I entered, then went back to scrolling. "Good walk, Mom?" Laura asked. "Yes," I replied softly. "Very good." She smiled, not knowing that my handbag now held the documents that would undo every lie they'd built. Days turned into quiet weeks. Mr. Porter sent updates through short text messages. "Is greater than first motion filed. Bank notified. Awaiting response." Each message felt like a small breath of life returning to me. I didn't need to see results immediately. I just needed to know that the truth was moving slowly but surely back in my direction. One evening, as I stood by the kitchen window, I caught sight of Laura in the driveway, talking on her phone. Her voice was sharp, impatient. "I told you, Mom's just here for a while. She'll move out soon. Dad and I already agreed." She didn't know I was there. Standing in the shadow of the hallway, watching her words fall like stones. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. The next morning, I baked her favorite lemon cake, the same one I used to make when she was a child. She was surprised when I placed a slice in front of her at breakfast. "You're in a good mood," she said, smiling cautiously. "I am," I answered. "It's nice to see everyone happy." She nodded, not realizing the irony in my words. Happiness can be so fragile when it's built on lies. Later that day, I received one final message from Mr. Porter. "Is greater than, everything is in place. They'll be notified soon." I stared at the message for a long time, the sunlight catching the edge of my teacup. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop chasing love from people who only saw you as a burden. That night, Laura and Ethan laughed in the living room, the TV flashing across their smiling faces. I watched them from the hallway for a moment, then turned away, whispering to myself, "Let them enjoy the calm. The storm has already begun." The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. Laura picked it up from the mailbox, flipping it over in her hand. It was from the district court. She frowned, calling out, "Dad, did you order something?" Ethan looked up from his coffee. "No. Why?" She tore it open. The sound of paper ripping filled the quiet kitchen. Then, silence. Her face turned pale. "Dad," she whispered, It's about the house." Ethan took the paper from her, scanning the words quickly. His jaw tightened, eyes darting from one line to another. He looked up, startled, and met my gaze across the table. "Did you know about this?" he asked, voice sharp. I stirred my tea slowly, the spoon clinking against the cup. He pushed his chair back. I folded my hands in my lap and met his anger with calm. I did what I should have done a long time ago. I told the truth. Laura's voice trembled. "You can't just take it all back. It's ours now." I looked at her, at the daughter I once would have given everything for. "No, Laura. It was never yours to take." She blinked rapidly. Her words caught somewhere between guilt and disbelief. Ethan reached for his phone, muttering something about calling the lawyer. But before he could dial, I spoke quietly. "There's no point. Mr. Porter already handled everything. The accounts are frozen. The house title is restored. You'll get a copy of the judgment later today." For the first time, the house fell truly silent. No laughter, no excuses, just the sound of truth settling into every corner of the room. Ethan stood there, shoulders tense, unable to meet my eyes. Laura sat down slowly, tears pooling in her eyes. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. Only a strange, gentle sadness. The kind that comes when something finally ends. "I never wanted it to be this way," I said quietly. "All I ever asked for was honesty. But you chose convenience over love. So now, you live with what you built." Laura tried to speak, but no words came. Ethan walked out of the room without looking back. The front door closed with a dull thud. I sat there for a long time, listening to the sound of my own breathing. The house was still almost peaceful again. Later that evening, when the sun began to set, I walked through the rooms one more time. The walls were bare, the furniture new, but I didn't see emptiness anymore. I saw space that was finally mine again. In the living room, I found one of Laura's scarves hanging on the back of a chair. I folded it neatly and placed it by the door. Then, I turned off the lights and sat on the couch, the same one they once bought with my money. My phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Porter. "Is greater than. It's done. Everything is back in your name. Take care, Helen." I smiled faintly. My hands were steady, for the first time in months. Through the window, I could see the faint glow of the streetlights outside. The world looked the same, but I felt different, lighter, stronger. I whispered to myself, "Is greater than." They thought I wouldn't come back, but I did. Then I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the silence settle around me. Not the silence of loss, but the silence of peace. Finally returned home. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.